Hi everyone, it's Scott. I wanted to dash off one more video before I move, which is going to be a big change in my life, but there's actually something that I wanted to talk about, so one more video before I leave this particular place that I'm living. As you all know, of course, the Oscars were just a short while ago, and I found it kind of interesting the way that Birdman and Boyhood were sort of competing for not only Best Picture but Best Director. It seems sort of the inverse of what was happening in 2010 when the two frontrunners for Best Picture were The King's Speech and The Social Network. The King's Speech was sort of like a sentimental favorite, kind of a feel-good movie, whereas The Social Network seemed a lot more cynical and a lot more hip, maybe. Birdman seemed like the hip choice this year, the sort of satirical, kind of darkly humorous hip film, whereas Boyhood was sort of the sentimental film. So I figured that Boyhood would be the favorite to win, but in thinking about it, it makes sense that Birdman won Best Picture and Best Director because it's about show business and it's about actors, whereas The King's Speech was, in a way, also kind of a bit about acting. It was about a guy who was trying to work up the nerve to speak in front of a very, very large audience throughout pretty much the entire movie, and he eventually triumphs, and that's why one of the reasons why the Academy liked it so much. I was very disappointed that not only Social Network lost out on Best Picture, but also Inception and Toy Story 3 to The King's Speech, which I didn't like nearly as much. On the other hand, I like Birdman quite a lot. I think it's quite a technical achievement, but then again, Boyhood is an achievement all in itself. They're just two very extreme kinds of filmmaking, one of which was only shot in 30 days and shot in these incredibly long, intricately choreographed takes and all blended together to look like one big shot, whereas Boyhood has this whole big long production schedule, which was its own logistical nightmare. Both are very admirable pictures. I really wanted Boyhood to win because I've liked Linklater for a long time, but you know, it's not the end of the world. I am disappointed. Yes, I am. It could have been. I mean, Birdman's a good choice for Best Picture. The only thing that I don't like about Birdman is the subtitle. And not really the subtitle itself, more in the way that it's in parentheses. They just look like they're in the wrong place. I don't get that. Anyway, one of the things that people have been talking about lately, a couple of movies lately, one of which was nominated for only a couple of Oscars and should have been gotten a lot more nominations, according to a lot of people, which is Selma, the movie about Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights March. Not only did the lead actor miss out on getting a nomination, but also the director, Anna Duvany, I believe her name is, or Duvary. I should have looked up her name so I can make sure I was spelling it right. People were going, there's not enough black people getting nominations, there's not enough women getting nominations. Here's a great movie directed by a black woman and it didn't get a nomination for Best Director. This is a total sham. Now, I saw Selma, I really like it a lot, but I think it's kind of interesting that not only is this movie being talked about quite a lot, but also 50 Shades of Grey, which is this huge box office hit because of the loyalty and the fan base for the source material. This is a movie that's also directed by a woman, and I just wonder how relevant it is. I know they wanted to sort of court a particular audience, and they figured by hiring a female screenwriter to adapt the book and a female director, they could sort of stave off any kind of accusations of misogyny, whereas you've got the main character, the male, who's entering into this relationship with, S&M features with the lead actress, with the lead female character. But anyway, people have been talking a little bit about women directors, and I haven't really made a habit of seeking out films that are directed by women or written by women or what have you. I'm just looking for movies that appeal to me. But I thought it might be an interesting experiment to do a little IMDb search on movies that have been directed by women and make a little top 20 list, which I managed to do. I was originally only going to do a top 10, but I decided to do a 20 because I came up with a lot. Number 20, Stop Loss. Oh, by the way, I should say before I started here, I only picked one movie per director. A couple of the women on this list have directed probably multiple, 2 or 3 movies that I might put on a list like this, but I decided to only pick one movie for each person. Stop Loss is directed by Kimberly Peirce, who also did Boys Don't Cry. It's about a soldier in the Gulf who's played by Ryan Phillippe, and he's about to leave the service, but he gets what they call stop loss, which is like he's gotten orders to return to active duty and go back overseas, despite the fact that they're trying to stave off the possibility of their personnel being reduced over there by requiring soldiers to not, leave when their tour is up, when their 2 years or whatever is up, and they're required to go back. And he tries fighting it, and he considers running off to Canada or Mexico or something like that. It's a good drama. I really like it a lot. Number 19, I Shot Andy Warhol, which is directed by Mary Herron, who also directed American Psycho. This is a movie starring Lily Taylor as Valerie Solanas, who wrote the Scum Manifesto, and Jared Harris as Andy Warhol, the famous New York artist who she shot out of frustration. She was trying to get him to produce one of her scripts as a play, and he kind of got creeped out by her eventually. He found her fascinating at first, but eventually got kind of creeped out by her and cut off contact with her, so she got really angry about that. Anyway, there's a really, really great cast of actors in this movie. People like Martha Plimpton and Stephen Dorff, a lot of good actors in this. It's a fun movie. It's comedic. It's got serious parts, but it's mostly comedic as well. Number 18 is an ensemble drama called 13 Conversations About One Thing. It's directed by Jill Sprecher, who also did a film called Clockwatchers. This is an ensemble with Alan Arkin and Matthew McConaughey and Clea Duvall and a bunch of other actors. It sort of has one of those multiple storyline movies where they're sort of tenuously connected to each other. It was on cable pretty recently, about a couple months ago. I watched it again and really enjoyed it. Number 17, Look Who's Talking, from Amy Heckerling, who also directed Clueless. This is the movie in which John Travolta as a cab driver, and he takes a single mom, played by Kirstie Alley, to the hospital to give birth to her baby, and ends up striking up a relationship with her, and of course the baby his thoughts are voiced by Bruce Willis. Really fun movie. Lots of fun. Number 16, Blue Car. I have sort of a personal connection to this movie. It was directed by a woman named Karyn Moncrieff, who I actually got to meet on a couple of occasions. Her mother was a friend of my dad's, and so in hanging out with him, I got to hang out with the both of them as well. She had a couple special screenings of this film in Chicago, one of which was during the Chicago International Film Festival. She also did a movie with Brittany Murphy a few years later called The Dead Girl, which is also very good. Blue Car, the main character is played by Agnes Bruckner. She's a high school student. David Strathairn is her English teacher, and she starts meeting with him outside of class, working on her poetry, and eventually his interest in her becomes less than, teacherly. It's a good drama, really good drama, and David Strathairn is a fantastic actor, of course. It was really a great pleasure to get to see this movie and talk with Karyn Moncrieff about it in person. That was really nice. Number 15, Private Parts, the Howard Stern movie, directed by Betty Thomas. Really, really funny movie, of course. Howard Stern and a lot of the crew on his show at the time, and this came out in '97, so a lot of the people who he worked with played themselves in the movie, but also, of course, you've got Paul Giamatti as Pig Vomit, the guy who's the executive at the radio station, who's sort of the bane of his existence. Yeah, really, really funny movie. Really enjoyed that a lot. Number 14, Fish Tank, which is a very low-budget feature from the UK, directed by Andrea Arnold. One of the first movies I ever saw Michael Fassbender in. He's a supporting character. The main character is a teen girl whose mom starts dating Michael Fassbender. But eventually Michael Fassbender gets interested in the daughter, and when he eventually spurns her, she sort of semi-kidnaps his daughter. It's a really good drama. It's kind of intense. It's a really good film. My number 17 is You've Got Mail by Nora Ephron, who also directed Sleepless in Seattle and wrote the script for When Harry Met Sally. I like this movie better than Sleepless in Seattle, mostly because the main characters, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, actually get to speak to each other and converse throughout the movie. Of course, half of it is through email exchanges, and they don't know each other's identity. I really like this movie a lot. A lot of people just think it's fluff, but there's sort of an undercurrent of sadness in this. Meg Ryan's character, this is actually a remake of a movie called The Shop Around the Corner, and Meg Ryan is essentially playing the original character's daughter, who's taken over the bookstore and is about to be squeezed out of business by Fox Books, the big bookstore chain, which is a bit like Borders, that's run by mega millionaire Tom Hanks. But unbeknownst to the both of them, they're actually having conversations with each other online, where they're like the closest of friends. And of course, there's a possibility of romance here. I just like there's an interesting theme of sort of letting go of the past. When there's a point in the movie where Meg Ryan just can't keep her store financially viable, and she has to close it down. And as she's writing to Tom Hanks about this, she says, "I feel like I have died, and I feel like my mom has died all over again." I always find the movie kind of touching, more so than a lot of the other romantic comedies that I see. My number 16? No, yeah. Which one was that? That was 17. No, sorry, that one was... I'm sorry, I'm losing track right here. That was 12. No, that was 13. I'm sorry, that was 13. You've got mail. 12 is Aeon Flux. I'm sorry, I'm messing up the numbers here. I forgot to write them down next to the titles. Aeon Flux is directed by Karyn Kusama, who's best known for directing Girl Fight with Michelle Rodriguez, and she also did Jennifer's Body with Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried. Aeon Flux is an adaptation of an MTV animated series, and a lot of people don't like this movie a lot, but I think it's really a lot of fun. Charlize Theron plays this futuristic mercenary named Aeon Flux, who's carrying out assassinations and acts of sabotage against the government of her extremely fascist, futuristic city where she lives. Everyone is contained into this one area because viruses apparently wiped out the rest of the world. But there's a number of really interesting twists throughout the movie that I found was really clever, and I really like the movie a lot. Okay, so yeah, sorry, that was 12. Number 11 is Whale Rider, which is directed by Niki, Caro. She wanted to do some other films, actually one pretty recently, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, Keisha Castle-Hughes, of course, is the main character. She became a very young Best Actress nominee when this came out. It's about the Australian girl who takes on the mantle of a sort of a community leader in an effort to inspire people to sort of a down-and-out community in her neighborhood, and she sort of has to take on this sort of traditional role of, it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I don't really remember the specifics, but the movie is really, really good. It's just, I wish I'd, familiarized myself with the plot a little bit more, but I remember liking it quite a bit when it came out. Okay, now for my top 10. Sorry about the number thing. Real Genius is a movie which came out in the 80s. It was one of the first movies I saw Val Kilmer in, along with Top Secret. I became a big Val Kilmer fan after seeing this movie. Martha Coolidge is the director. Basically, the main character is a kid named Mitch, who's about 15 years old when he enters a science college and becomes one of the star pupils of the hotshot professor. Val Kilmer plays Chris Knight, who is the former hotshot pupil, and he's about to graduate, but instead of doing schoolwork, he spends his immense talent and intellect playing pranks on people, which he has a lot of fun with. Really funny movie, lots of fun. I've liked it for a long time. My number 9 is called A Love Song for Bobby Long. This came out, I think, in 2003. It's directed by Shainee Gabel. I'm not really familiar with the rest of her films. It's a drama with John Travolta and Scarlett Johansson and Gabriel Macht. Scarlett Johansson's mother dies, and she leaves her house to both her and these two other people in New Orleans. Travolta has been living there for a long time. He's a former boyfriend of her mom's, and he's, a drunk basically, drinks all day long. He's a former English professor, and Gabriel Macht is his former student, and they sort of live together and support each other. So when she arrives, basically, she makes an effort to sort of straighten them out, despite the fact that she's like, 19 years old or something at the time. Anyway, one of my favorite Scarlett Johansson films, as well as, just a really good drama overall. Number 8, Higher Ground. This is a movie that was directed by Vera Farmiga, who of course is an actress from Bates Motel and The Departed and a bunch of other films. She's a deeply religious woman who's married to Joshua Leonard. They live on a Christian cult sort of community and just sort of dealing with everyday life there. It's a really interesting film. All the movies from here on out made my top 10 of whatever year they came out in. That was 8. Number 7 is The Beaver, directed by Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster, of course, is a famous actress who has also directed Little Man Tate, Home for the Holidays. My favorite of her films is this one. Mel Gibson is the main character. She co-starred with him in Maverick, of course, and she plays his wife in this movie. Mel Gibson's the CEO of a toy company, and he's been suffering from depression, and so he creates this alternate personality which speaks to the beaver puppet on his hand in an effort to liven his life up. Everybody kind of thinks that he's speaking through this puppet just because it's fun or because it's helpful to him, but this other personality is actually sort of controlling him, and it's a little bit scary. Really good movie, really good movie. Let's see, that is number 7. Number 6 Zero Dark 30, directed by Kathryn Bigelow. I've seen a lot of Kathryn Bigelow's films over the years. This is definitely the best one. It's, of course, the one where Jessica Chastain plays a CIA analyst who's doing a lot of research, trying to find out what happened to Osama bin Laden, trying to locate him so that, SEAL Team 6 can go in and take him out. Really, really compelling movie. Another movie by Kathryn Bigelow I like a lot is Strange Days with Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett. And of course, Near Dark is a very influential movie that she did from the 80s. But Zero Dark 30 is clearly her favorite. Oh, and she also happened to win Best Director and Best Picture for The Hurt Locker. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Patty Jenkins is the director of Monster, which won Charlize Theron the Best Lead Actress Oscar. She co-stars with Christina Ricci. She played the real-life serial killer Aileen Wuornos. I believe that's how you say her name, or it's Aileen maybe. She was basically down on her luck and ended up prostituting herself, and ended up killing a number of different men who accosted her, and she just started killing them randomly, even though they didn't threaten her, for their cash, so that she didn't have to work, because she's no good at working. She's just no good at fitting into society like a regular person. Really, really intense movie. Very good movie. I'm cheating with my number 4 here, because it's actually Valerie Faris co-directed this film with Jonathon Dayton. The two of them have been directing music videos ever since like the late 80s or early 90s or whatever. They did a number of very particular music videos, and they did Little Miss Sunshine, of course, but my favorite film of theirs is Ruby Sparks, which came out in 2012. The lead actor is Paul Dano. He's a writer, and he ends up creating a fictional woman, Ruby Sparks, who then sort of pops into his life in the flesh. And she's played by Zoe Kazan. Zoe Kazan was actually the screenwriter of this movie. Really, really fun movie. Made my top 5 of 2012. Also, Annette Bening and Antonio Banderas are in this movie as well. I've only seen it the one time, actually, but I really, really liked it a lot. My number 3 is Yentl. Yentl is an 80s musical that stars and was directed by Barbra Streisand. It's about a Hasidic Jewish girl whose father dies. Her father was a scholar and was teaching her the Talmud, even though the rules of their society say that girls can't learn the Talmud, only boys can, because only boys can grow up to be rabbis and what have you. So once her father dies, she decides to cut her hair and call herself by a boy's name and go off to school where she could study. And so she's hiding her identity, but she also meets Mandy Patinkin, who's another young man who's studying the Talmud, and she becomes very close to him. The music in this movie is just incredible. Some of the best music I've ever heard, and it's certainly one of the best musicals I've ever seen, if not the best musical. I actually did a video in which I attempted to sing a lot of those songs, just because I like it so much. Barbra Streisand's made a number of movies as a director, but this is clearly my favorite. Number 2, Awakenings. Awakenings came out in 1990. It was directed by Penny Marshall, who also did Big with Tom Hanks, and A League of Their Own, the women's baseball movie. Those are all good movies, but my favorite is definitely this one. Robert De Niro was nominated for Best Actor. Robin Williams was also in the film. Basically, Robert De Niro's a patient at a hospital. He's been comatose for a long time, and Robin Williams is developing the theory that the physical tremors that they had when they were younger have sort of paralyzed them, not in a mental way, but in sort of a physical way, whereas they just can't stop. It's a little bit complicated, but basically he formulates a drug that allows them to start moving and talking again. And so De Niro and other patients are getting accustomed to the world many years after they sort of left for a while. They weren't in a coma or anything like that. They were just, impaired to the point where they couldn't move or speak. It's a very moving film. Always like this movie. Really like it a lot. My number 1 favorite film, directed by a woman, is by Kelly Reichardt, who also did Meek's Cutoff, and recently Night Moves with Jesse Eisenberg and Dakota Fanning. But this movie is Wendy and Lucy, which stars Michelle Williams as a young woman who's only got a few $100s to her name. She's trying to drive to Alaska, where she will get work, not only get work, but also room and board. And seems like a very good setup, but her car breaks down. She's stuck in this tiny little town with very little money and hardly any means to actually get where she needs to go. And so it's basically a week in her life as she tries to figure out what her next move is. Very sad movie. Also, her dog gets stolen, basically. Not really stolen. She ends up shoplifting food for her dog and gets arrested. And by the time she gets back to the store, her dog is gone. So she spends the rest of the movie looking for him. Yeah, sad movie, really sad movie. Yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies of the decade of the Audies is when it came out in 2008, 2009, something like that. Yeah, really, really terrific movie. So that is my top 20. Sorry, I messed up the numbers on some of them. That's my top 20 films directed by women. Yeah, this is, like I said, I just did an IMDb search, titles directed by women, pretty much it, and I picked basically about a bunch that I thought were good. So I hope that if you haven't seen some of these movies, you take a look at them, because they're quite good. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another video very soon. Appreciate it. Bye.